Gene Simmons once spent 2 years living with one of the most famous women on the planet. He called her his first love. He spent thousands just to hear her voice from across the world. And then, he left her. Not for a stranger, not for someone new, but for her best friend. The woman he left was Cher. The woman he chose instead was Diana Ross. And the reason it all started falling apart? A simple Christmas gift. Sounds unreal, right? But it gets even stranger. Before all of that, you need to understand who Gene Simmons really was at the time. Back in the late 70s, he was already a global rock star with Kiss. But here's the twist. Nobody knew what he actually looked like. The band lived behind face paint, larger-than-life costumes, and wild stage personas. Gene was the demon on stage, but off stage? Just another guy walking unnoticed through Los Angeles. Imagine being one of the most famous performers in the world, and still completely invisible. What does that do to a person? That double life shaped everything. When Gene met Cher, she didn't fall for the rock god. She fell for the private man behind the makeup. The one who read constantly, who was careful with money, who bonded with her kids. Not exactly what you'd expect, right? In fact, Cher later called him the best relationship she had ever had. And that's coming from someone who had already been married twice. So if it was that good, why did it end? Their story actually began in a way that almost sounds like a joke. It was 1977, at a high-profile event. When they were introduced, Cher thought Gene was someone else entirely. Awkward start, right? But somehow, it worked. He drove her home that night. The next day, he showed up with gifts for her son. A smart move. But then, almost immediately, he nearly ruined it by flirting with her friend on their first date. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. Why? Because when Gene left for Japan, something changed. He called her constantly. Long-distance calls back then were expensive, and he didn't hold back. By the time he was done, he had racked up a bill of $2,800 just talking to her. Think about that for a second. Chasing someone who wasn't even sure about you yet. And then, out of nowhere, he told her he loved her. That moment flipped everything. But was it love, or obsession? By 1978, they were fully together. Living in Los Angeles and Malibu, appearing in public, building something real. Gene even said he had never had a steady girlfriend before her. No one had ever seen this side of him. It looked stable. It looked serious. It looked like it might last. But behind the scenes, something was already starting to shift. And when it did, it happened fast. It all comes down to that Christmas. Gene needed a gift for Cher. A tough task. What do you buy someone who already has everything? So he asked her. And her answer changed everything. She told him to call her best friend, Diana Ross, who was in New York. She trusted her. She believed Diana would help him pick something perfect. Seems harmless, right? But what happened next? Nobody could have predicted. Gene called Diana. She invited him over. He walked into her world and immediately felt something different. She was confident, powerful, completely in control. They talked. They laughed. They connected. One visit turned into more. They started spending time together, playing racquetball, hanging out. And slowly, without planning it, something crossed a line. The question is, did he know exactly what he was doing? By 1980, the situation had fully exploded. Gene was living with Diana Ross. Cher knew. In fact, for a brief moment, all three were seen around each other, keeping things polite on the surface. But underneath, it was messy, painful, irreparable. The friendship between Cher and Diana didn't survive. It couldn't. And yet, somehow, Gene stayed in contact with both. How does someone even manage that? Now here's the part most people wonder about. Why didn't Gene ever marry Cher? The truth is, it wasn't that simple. At the time, neither of them was really pushing for marriage. Cher had already been through 2 failed ones. Gene didn't believe in it at all. He used to joke that marriage was an institution he didn't want to be part of. Easy answer, right? But was that really the truth? Or just an excuse? Because the deeper answer is harder to ignore. It wasn't that he didn't want to marry her. It's that his actions made it impossible. He didn't lose Cher because of some grand decision. He lost her because of small choices that added up to one big mistake. Even he admitted later that he was selfish, distracted, and careless with something real. So the real question becomes, did he realize what he lost too late? Years later, another woman entered his life. Shannon Tweed. Their relationship started like many of his others, but it didn't end the same way. She stayed. Through everything. Through behavior that most people wouldn't tolerate. Over time, something changed in him. Slowly. Not overnight. But enough to matter. And eventually, after nearly 3 decades together, they got married. So what finally changed? When Gene looked at his wedding ring after the ceremony, he admitted something surprising. He said he didn't even know what he had been afraid of all those years. That's it. Fear. Not logic. Not timing. Just fear, dressed up as freedom. And when you hear that, it makes you wonder, if he had faced that fear earlier, would things with Cher have turned out differently? Today, both Gene and Cher speak about their time together without bitterness. Cher still describes him as charming and intelligent. Gene still calls her his first love. Neither of them denies what they had. It was real. It mattered. And it ended not because they were wrong for each other, but because of the choices made along the way. That's what makes it linger. So now it comes down to this. Was leaving Cher one of the biggest mistakes of Gene Simmons' life? Or did everything happen exactly the way it was supposed to?